Oh, Saka! That is a diamond goal! When Eric tries one!
It's official. Arsenal are the XG champions of Europe. This is not that kind of gooner, an Arsenal podcast, and we're coming to you the day after the Champions League final, in which PSG, who we beat on XG multiple times, not that that means anything, but we did that. They went on to absolutely trounce Inter Milan in the Champions League final, 5-0. And they have earned their first ever Champions League title. So congrats to them. Although I'm having trouble really treating this as like the underdog story that a lot of people are trying to sell it as. But yeah, that's a thing that happened. But we're going to talk about Arsenal. We are going to kind of chat, Thierry Henry's comments on the overlap or whatever they call that podcast that they do over at Sky Sports. There's a debate that we've been having that we'll touch on in a second that we'll kind of get into, and we might do a little bit of transfer news, and then we're going to jump into the season superlatives, which I've decided to start calling the Goonie Awards. I don't know how other people feel about that. So we'll see if that catches on. If it doesn't, we'll just stick with season superlatives. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like the Goonies sounds, obviously you think about the movie, but who I don't know. Do you guys do not seem to like the name at all?
No, I'm willing to roll the dice. Let's see how that goes.
I'm not prepared to comment, so we'll just go with it.
Well, we'll see how that works out with the viewers and the listeners. But before we get into that, we're going to we've been having a bit of a chat behind the scenes about a particular aspect of the season that we've witnessed, and basically the debate that myself, John, and Drew have been having is kind of down to the importance not of trophies generally, but I think of every trophy, if that makes sense, right? And this debate's kind of spawned from Spurs winning the Europa League and Chelsea winning the Conference League, and us just kind of talking about this idea about whether or not they've had better seasons than we have, as well as how much does it really mean to win those trophies. I mean, I think we're all in agreement that the Premier League and the Champions League, those are that's the creme de la creme. That's legit. And FA Cup and the EFL Cup, those are obviously things that you're happy winning as well. But where I tend to come down on this is with the Europa League and the Conference League, I don't want to say that they don't count in all instances. I just think that for Arsenal and for teams kind of in that same bracket and above that are really trying to win the league and win the Champions League as often as they can, the Europa League and the Conference League aren't really things to celebrate. You know what I mean? If you're in those competitions, that means you failed at some point to be there. So I'm not really moved by kind of Spurs and Chelsea fans doing this whole thing where they they're rubbing it in our faces about winning more European trophies than we have and talk about having had better seasons. I just don't buy that. But I'll kind of turn this over to you guys, whichever you want to jump in here first. How where are you at in this conversation? I mean, John, I think you're probably the one who is kind of the outlier here in terms of how you feel about it.
Probably. I'm not going to go as far as to say that Spurs or any of them had a better season, but what I will go as far as to say is I bet Spurs fans are having more fun than we are right now, and enjoy, have a better feeling about their season than we do. So, is it a better season in reality, considering we were competing for the top European trophy and almost got there? Clearly, if you want to just to prove that point, I mean, you look at who's having more fun, Spurs fans or PSG fans. for many reasons. So like there is a qualitative difference in the kind of trophies that you can win. That's definitely not a debate. What kind of the debate that we were having behind the scenes in my position was, if you're in the competition, you want to win the trophy. And you really have to put yourself in the mindset of the players and how they kind of developed and grew. I don't know if you've ever known any professional athletes, especially in a team sport like football, but from the earliest time they were kicking balls, they dreamed of winning trophies, and the mindset they had was showing tangible results over the course of a season, especially early on in their careers, where they would win trophies, and that was a tangible mark of their success as a team. All right. Obviously, winning the league is the biggest one, but any kind of silverware they could get their hands on, they were almost conditioned to get that. That was everything that they did, win trophies. That's why it's so important. That's why everyone talks about it. For fans, it's important too, because it's bragging rights, and we understand that the purpose of the game, there's a lot of them, but a big one, I would say probably the main one, is to be the best, either in the competition you're in the season you're in, whatever. That's the mark of success. To say that Spurs had a better season than us, I don't think you can do that given where we were and what we were competing for. But this notion that the Europa League or the League Cup or anything like that is somehow not something that we should want to win because, we should have our sights on something greater, or, that's kind of where I have a bit of a debate, because you can only really compete in the competitions that you're in, right? When we were in the Europa League and we were fighting for the Europa League, I wanted to win that trophy. I didn't care if most fans thought it was beneath us or whatever. The players certainly want to win it, and it was a trophy we had never won before. So my position is, if you're in that competition, you want to win the trophy. If you don't, you failed a bit. And the players definitely feel that way because, again, they're conditioned early on to get that tangible result at the end of a season. So all in all, I think we're all in agreement that Arsenal had the better season. I just think that what trophies mean in a season for the players specifically, and me personally, is that it means something. It means a tangible result. It means a tangible result. Obviously, points are somewhat of a tangible result. You can look at the table at the end of the season, and that tells a story as well, and that's great. But it's different. There's a fundamental difference between finishing second and having more points than another team. With the, I guess I would add the caveat that top four, being where you are in the top four is relevant and tangible because you end up in different competitions for it. But, points in a season versus silverware at the end of a season, one just is better for the fans, one's better for the players too. So I don't know. It's an interesting debate, which is why we wanted to talk about it on here.
Yeah. And I don't think what you said is like crazy at all. Honestly, like
that's good.
Yeah. You're not out of your mind, John.
Yeah, all right, good to know.
No, but I do like see where you're coming from, where it's like you could, so like for instance, like kind of sometimes I feel like in 22-23 we should have maybe thrown the Europa League a little bit when we realized that we were probably going to finish top four and really focused on the league. And I still tend to think that would have at least helped us in our Premier League campaign. But I do think that there is something to be said about players going out and winning the competition that they're in, just for like, kind of their mindset in the future. Where like, for instance, Chelsea just won the Conference League with the group of players that they had. And, up until that point, they've been treated as like the £1 billion bottle jobs or whatever, right? And I think there might be something to be said about the fact that, these guys are going to be in the Champions League next year. And maybe in instances where they're facing adversity, where they're a little uncertain, they could kind of fall back on that Conference League win and kind of think to themselves, well, like, we know how to win tournaments. Like we know what it takes to win. I know. Yeah. It's I don't know. It's maybe a little shaky, but I mean, Drew, why don't you come in on this?
Well, it definitely helps.
I think it helps a little bit.
Well, let me put it this way: it definitely doesn't hurt.
Definitely doesn't hurt. But Drew, what?
Well, I'm gonna work my way backwards. I'll mention the Chelsea thing first, and knowing my brain, I did a deep dive into a few things about the Champions League season, the Europa League season, and the Conference League season this year. So in the UEFA points rankings for this year, for points accrued this season of European clubs, Arsenal are third, United are fourth, Spurs are fifth, Chelsea are sixth. Oh, ninth. So that's got to do with like league placement, also how they performed in Europe, that kind of thing. The average coefficient ranking of opponents faced in those competitions are pretty interesting. Our average coefficient ranking opponent was like 31.2. So if you're breaking down Europe into some sort of tiered system, similar to like the English football ladder, that's roughly if you're playing a team in like the top 2 leagues, give or take.
And Drew, just if anyone's listening and doesn't understand like the coefficient, can you explain that a little bit?
Oh yeah, so coefficient ranking is just like clubs gain points every year, and it's accrued over time based on the strength of the league they're in, the competitions they're playing in, the strength of the opponents they beat, draw or lose against, and that's like accrued over time, right? So every like for example, I forget what our coefficient ranking. I think our coefficient ranking is like 10th or it's top 20. I can't remember what it is honestly. So the strength of our opponents, 31.2 on average, like, and we have 3 or 4 of them that are in the top 5, top 6. Inter, Real Madrid. Real Madrid's first in coefficient ranking for the record. Inter were 6th. Atalanta were like 16th, that kind of thing. Man United's average coefficient ranking for the opponent was 52.6. Spurs was 51.8. Chelsea's was 99.5. So here's some highlights for that. Panathinaikos, 111th. FC Noah, who no one heard of until this season, are 273rd. Heidenheim, 103. Astana, 134. Shamrock Rovers, 99. Legia Warsaw, 70. The best team they played all season was Betis in the final, and they're 40th, which is not bad. So they had to beat a legitimate contender in the final. But this is a competition where they didn't register Cole Palmer in the group stage, their best player. Routinely, they fielded 4, 5, 6 academy players in the group stage, won comfortably. I don't think you can look at that continental campaign and lean back and say, well, we did this in in Conference League, we'll be fine in Champions League. We can lean back on that mentality. I don't think you can. Knowing you can basically play your kids in a competition and comfortably win it doesn't really do much in terms of, for me anyway, to know where you stand when your back's against the wall when you're playing Real Madrid over 2 legs, at the Bernabeu, for example. It's a totally different thing for me. I do agree with John that when you win trophies, not only does it make you feel good, but also you want that tangible success at a certain point. However, I would say that for the amount of money Chelsea has spent, looking at the Conference League as a key to success is not one of them. Like, they're a club that should be doing what PSG just did over time, right? And most people would look at PSG's trajectory under their ownership and say it's more or less an abject failure until this Champions League win. Because when you spend that much money, when you have the highest wage bill in Europe, yes, they've been better lately when it comes to transfers, going away from big star names. They gambled on Ousmane Dembele. They gambled on Vitinha, who fought in the Premier League. They focus on more youth development. Desiree Doué looks like to be one of the best young players on the planet at the moment. They had to switch gears quickly, but to get there, they still had to spend an absolute amount of money to do it. And had they have not won Champions League this year, you would say that you'd have to keep asking questions, right? So that's kind of where they're at. And if you look at Chelsea, if you swap positions and PSG just walk the Conference League, there isn't a single fan or part of the ownership that would say this is a successful season because they won the Conference League. But I do think you do want to have that like cemented mentality of when we go into a competition or in the league, you have to win things. I agree with that aspect of it, but I think there's too much context surrounding individual seasons, competitions that you're in, to kind of like a blanket statement over it. I think there's too many things you could focus on about that, and I still maintain that if give me our season over Spurs' season any day of the week, because most Spurs fans still want Postecoglou to go, despite winning the Europa League.
Well, it looks like Spurs are about to fire him.
Yeah, and I think that's telling. But he won them a European trophy, and they're still sacking him potentially.
Yeah, I don't. Whether a team decides to sack a manager or whether fans want a manager sacked, I don't know if it's very determinative of much, because first of all, fans certainly not. What fans want with a manager, as we as Arsenal fans know, and
not all of us. Please do not lump us into the group of the idiots. That's really
fair. But my point remains, though. My point remains that if you're looking at a good factor to determine whether a right decision is made or any kind of objective analysis, what the fans want with the manager, and ultimately what a team wants with the manager, especially one like Spurs who notoriously just fire manager. So do Chelsea, another one, with sometimes success, sometimes not. But I agree overall with your point about looking at the pure numbers and like what did they actually achieve, and is it enough for a club like that? And that goes back, Sham, to our conversation about what is it that would that be enough for Arsenal? And what I mentioned when we were having this conversation was it wouldn't. By very definition, we're not in the Europa League. So if somehow we find ourselves in the Europa League and we win it, we have backtracked, even though we won a trophy, and that that's undeniable. That isn't undeniable. So you have to look at it in that context too. Where are you as a club, and where do you want to be, and what are your goals? Right now, our goals are sky high, which is why I think our standards are so high, which is why we look back at even just finishing second as a failure in some regards, yet still can kind of rationalize it in the context of we still had a better season than them, even though we didn't win silverware, and we just finished second, which is technically a failure of what our goals were, because we know what the standard is at Arsenal, and it's so high now. It's Champions League in the league, when before it was top 4. Please get us in the top 4 for a long time.
Yep.
And that at that, but you have to look at it at that point. At that point, I wanted to win the Europa League. There were fans saying, "I don't, I don't care if we win it or not. We just want to get in the Champions League, and it's just a stepping stone." But again, I come back to as a fan, you want to win the competitions you're in. As a player, you want to win everything. You want to win every game. You want to win every competition. That's the mentality that you need to have. And I think that we didn't really have that for a long time. I think even with Arsene Wenger for a while there, it was the FA Cup. Like that was the standard, right? Top 4 in the FA Cup. We wanted, that was it. Maybe there was this rebuilding. We had all this money from the stadium and all that. And we were still, whatever it was, but that was kind of the standard. And the players knew that, and they were really good at executing upon that until they weren't. And then once that standard fell, then it was okay. Everything that we kind of accepted as being okay in the status quo is not being met anymore. And that's when you started to see a change in the way that people felt about the manager, in the way that the media started talking about Arsenal. So, the standards you set, I was bring that up because to mention the standards that you set as a club and that you have to ascribe to or aspire to, those are extremely important. All right. And that is a mark of what you're doing, your relative success as a club, and what you're doing in a season, and whether it's good enough. For us, it's not good enough because we set our standards so high. But for a club like Spurs, who all they've been wanting is a trophy, it's absolutely enough. And it's a good trophy for them, which I won't, unfortunately.
You don't have to say unfortunately, because they're a club we all despise, but that's the reality of it, right? Like they've been begging for some type of major silver forever. But I also agree with you that how you reflect on a season is definitely connected to where your standards lie. And I'll always try to bring back to a American sports reference if I can. Like every year the Yankees don't win the World Series, it's a failure. Doesn't matter if they have the best record in baseball in the regular season. Doesn't matter if Aaron Judge breaks 60-60, which would never happen. But if he did it, those would still be awesome superlatives for a season. But if they don't win a World Series every year, it's a failure for the Yankees, and also for Yankees fans. But also that's because they have the most World Series championships in history. So the Yankees are Man United, basically. If you want to,
it's tough being a Yankees fan. I think
it's also in that sense, it's also tough being a United fan because every year you go in, you know that the standard is we're Man United, right? Third biggest club in the world, tied for most Premier League or most trophies in English football from the league. You should be winning things every season, like Bayern, Real Madrid, Barcelona. All those things that's the standard where we subscribe to be. But I just also think I want to go back to something you said about the players. Yes, I do I have known and do know people that are professional athletes, and they will also tell you they want to win everything. They want to win every friendly. They want to win every training game, you know. And as someone who also played and coaches, you see it with players that have like an elite level. Like winning that's how you're wired. You're wired to win. Whether that's good or bad is another debate, right? But the whole point of becoming a professional athlete or even just a collegiate athlete to a high level is because you want to win everything. And that's why players will go to the places where they have the best chance of winning. Like, say what you will, but the reason why Trent went to Real Madrid over time is because A, it's the biggest club in the world. That's a pinnacle of a career. And on average, he has the best chance of winning major honors every season, year on year, there than Liverpool on average. You know, so I agree with John. I think that the players will, if you're a Spurs player or if you're a Chelsea player, you're going to love the fact you won a piece of silverware this season despite the context. But from our perspective, also, there is the context you can't ignore, right? So,
yeah, I mean, look, you can have players like Son now, like saying that he's a legend for Spurs, and I feel like there's a good argument now that he is because of yeah. So I think it's almost undebatable at this point that he is a legend for them. So you know, and you raise a great point about the players and wanting to win the trophies and going to places where they do win it, because a big, you know, if we're talking about winning anything. And one of our big fears and a big talking point amongst Arsenal fans and on this podcast is our key players and our star players that we love that allow us to do what we do and play the way we like to play and say things like we've had a better season even though we haven't won a trophy. Players like Saliba, players like Saka, maybe less so Saka than Saliba, but certainly there needs to come a point in time where those silverware needs to come in, even if it's not the league or the Champions League. There needs to be something, and it's because of the way that they are, their mentality, and it's something that's been instilled in them since they started kicking a ball, about winning and trophies. It's important for us as fans. We can compartmentalize trophies and we can rank them, and we could say to them. I don't think that they rank them the way that we do. They want that silverware. They want to raise it. They don't care. And if you're as a team not delivering any of those, you run the risk of having players leave. And look at Trent. I mean, this guy's won 2 leagues in a Champions League, and yet he still wants to go. And this is a kid who grew up there, and everyone's talking about Saka and how loyal he is. But I mean, you hope that that's the case, and you hope Saka is different. And it's kind of like, oh, my spouse is different, or my, whatever. But not always. Sometimes you just got to deal with it, and sometimes the reality is what it is. And there's a non-zero chance. There's a universe where Saka leaves if we don't win something at some point. And that's,
I think every player who's staying this summer, which is probably going to be all our best players, right? I think all those guys are staying this summer because they look at Arteta, they look at the way we played this season, they look at underlying metrics and like data that they have access to behind the scenes, and they still think that if you just add a couple more players into this, they will have a high chance of winning something. But if we're being really realistic here, if you go 2-3 more seasons without winning anything, that will change. Those players will be like, okay, well, now I'm 20, 25, 26, 27, 28. I got to go win something. And so, I think with everybody, you have a limited amount of time. So I'm glad Saka is staying, and I hope Saka stays at Arsenal for the rest of his career. But I think I personally am not under any illusion that our play, because what you said is true, John. Like, these guys want to win everything. I don't think people understand what psychopaths professional athletes are. I say that with all due respect, you have to be there, right? But people don't understand how much it really eats at these guys if they don't win things. Even like you said, even if it's the Conference League or the Europa League, if they don't win that, that will bother them. So yeah, I do think that is kind of.
Though I feel like fans underestimate how much work professional athletes put in every season. It controls their entire life more so than our everyday normal jobs, right? We get a break I get a break from being able to be a journalist. You guys get a break from, I won't say what you guys do without you saying it, but you guys get a break from what you guys do, right? That's important. But when you're a professional athlete, it's very rare that you get a break. And this is why the most dedicated ones, and I'm not as massive fan, but this is why Ronaldo gets so much credit, because he's so dedicated to his craft that even in the off season, he's still dedicated to being prepared for the next season, because he's wired to go out and want to be the best player in the world, to go out and everything he can. And I wouldn't call them psychopaths, but there is a level of like over the top dedication it requires to be a top level athlete in any sport, whether if you're playing professional ping pong or if you're playing, football or whatever it is. It takes, and I think so. And trophies are that vindication of your efforts. So that's why players are so wired for it. That's why players want to win something. If they don't win it, they're saying, well, why am I putting in all this work if I'm not winning something? I'll just go where I can win something, right? So, I mean, I always also think that football cultures are very different, right? And I think how players perceive the club they're at based off the culture they're in will define the choices they make. There's a reason why Thomas Müller was a one club man for his career. It's because to Thomas Müller and to Germans, Bayern is the biggest club in the world. And surely Bayern are one of the biggest clubs in the world, right? But Arsenal are not. So we don't are, and Wolves are not, or whoever. So there's also this mentality of how a player views what the pinnacle of their career can be, and they're working towards going to that. So I don't want to get into like a debate from 30 years from now, but because we're not the biggest club in the world, as much as I love Arsenal to death, there is a step up from us, right? So if we don't deliver, a player like Saka or Saliba or Gabriel or whoever might go there to go get the things that they seek, and we have to be able to be okay with that. Like the Steven Gerrards of the world are gone. Thomas Müllers don't exist anymore, really, like in football. But yeah, no, I think overall we're all kind of on the same page in terms of like the mentality that's required to succeed. But I mean, I still think Chelsea have had an absolutely diabolical season. If they didn't win the Conference League, or even if they won the Conference League and didn't finish top 4, they wouldn't even be in Champions League next season. So then it'd be an even worse season for them, in my estimation. But yeah,
should be interesting to see how they fare, or lack their or fluster.
Yeah, I guess we'll find out. We're all eating our words. They like win the league next season out of nowhere, and then we're all just going to.
Here's the thing about Chelsea: they've done stuff like that. They've done it. They've done it. They've done it a couple times. So you think they're out, and then all of a sudden it's like they just won't go away. It's this annoying. They have the money. They have what, like they have 1 billion players. So it's like, all it takes is like a Cole Palmer kind of a thing to happen with them. And I don't know why how they keep doing it, but someone's got to stop them already.
Yeah.
Hopefully they fail miserably. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see what happens with them. I mean, it's very clear this summer that kind of everyone is going to get better, and like more so than usual. I have this feeling that if you really stand still this summer, you will go you'll go backwards several spaces. So I want to turn to the Henry comments, and Henry appeared on, is it called Stick to Football? Is that what it is? That podcast that like
it's the overlap, but they have they rebrand it for like those.
I see.
Kind of sit down things. Did you guys watch the whole thing, by the way?
To be quite honest, I couldn't be bothered to sit through 90 minutes of that, but I did watch like the clip that everyone's talking about when it comes to Henry.
Yeah, it's actually a really good episode. I don't like a lot of the people that are on that show for obvious reasons, but I actually watched the whole thing. It was actually really good, and Henry gave a lot of really good insight on a lot of different topics. So I think it's probably worth the watch. But yeah.
So in case anyone didn't see the comments, which ones are you referring to?
Yeah, so the ones I'm referring to. So there's a point in the interview where obviously Henry's being asked his opinion on Arsenal under Arteta and kind of how things have gone. And so he said the following: the last 3 years, we've been in a situation where we should at least bring a cup to the club or be in a final. Man United played 5 finals in their last 5 years, the United that everyone laughs at. In the last 3 years of building, Arsenal didn't reach a final. This year, we didn't compete with Liverpool. I don't know what people think, but we didn't compete, not once. I'm not saying this season was a disappointment, but it's normal that people are raising questions now about what the team is doing. So those comments have caused quite a bit of a stir. And, I think I feel like a lot of the time people are under this impression that they need to pick sides, and you're either Team Arteta or Team Henry, or whatever the two extremes of the situation are. And it's kind of panned out this way as well, where you have people just being like, "Yep, Henry's right, Arteta out," and then there's other people being like, "This Henry guy, like we got to move past him already. Like that he needs to remember who he is." And
He didn't win a Champions League either.
not with us anyway.
Well, not with us. Yeah, Barcelona.
but yeah,
That doesn't help.
No, it doesn't. But like, yeah, I just want to get both of your thoughts on this because for me personally, I am bothered by something he said in this interview, but it's not that, and we can get to that in a second. But in terms of what he said here, I think it's really just him stating facts. Like everything he said is factual. Like that, those are things that happened, right? And I think what has happened is a lot of people have taken kind of a pre-existing impression that they have of Henry one way or another, and they've allowed that to inform like their perception of those comments and whether or not they're negative. And I think Henry, unfortunately, ever since the Daniel Ek attempted takeover of Arsenal, when he and Vieira and Bergkamp sided with Ek, I think there has been kind of this built-in conflict of interest in a way whenever he talks about Arsenal, and that's not to say like he shouldn't be talking about Arsenal or anything like that. And I don't really subscribe to like this notion that he should stay quiet and like only say positive things because it might give ammo to rival fans or like the likes of Neville and Carragher. I'm not really in those boats, but I do think just every time Henry says something that is less than positive about Arsenal, I do think to myself, you did try to play a role in changing the ownership of the club. So, again, it's a little bit of a conflict of interest, but Drew, I'll go to you first here. Kind of how are you feeling about those Henry comments?
No, I don't think he's wrong. I think it just kind of goes back to what we just talked about. I feel like the point that United, even at some of the lowest points in history, they're still reaching cup finals, is kind of what we were just discussing about. You should still be wired to win and have the best possible season you can despite circumstances. And I do think there's too much context about our season to say that we should have won a Premier League necessarily, that we should have won a Champions League final. We just saw the best team clearly just won Champions League for a reason. But he's not wrong to say that if United can reach like a Europa League final or whatever, like we should be doing better in terms of at least like the FA Cup or Carabao Cup or whatever it is. I think his comments just allude to the fact that, again, like there's got to be something tangible at some point. I think that's the overarching comment or thoughts behind this comment is you have to win something at some point, right? You've got to show like the receipts to everything we've been doing here. Basically, that's my takeaway from it, and getting to watch and getting to kind of see the way he responded to it. That's kind of how I think, because people forget that he won things for us, and he's coming from that player's mentality, right? Of an elite level player who wants to go out and win things, especially for a club that he loves and reports and respects. I mean, I don't necessarily think that he's wrong for being critical of us. I understand your point of his take when with the X stuff came out, but I also think that was also influenced by the fact that he felt maybe the ownership at the time wasn't the right ownership to take us to be able to compete with bigger clubs who are freely spending to get us to the top, right? And like we said about PSG, like, they're not some underdogs, or they spent an absolute mountain of money to get to where they are. But unfortunately, the modern game, as I said, where you have to spend to win. Like the days are gone when you can rely on academy players to win you a league title or a Champions League title. Like, you need to spend a lot of money if you can do it. So I think that's kind of where I'm coming from, where that what's the fastest route to get Arsenal to winning things? Is it Eck or is it KSE or whoever it is? That's kind of where I put my vote out to. I think that's what was his mentality was, and maybe still is, but I think his mind has changed as he's seen the progress. But now he's saying, I'm seeing the progress, but now I want the results now. I think that's kind of it. So I don't disagree with him at all. I think it's pretty spot on, actually.
Yeah. John, how about you?
I always feel a little awkward when Henry says anything kind of negative about Arsenal. Just because of what you kind of mentioned, that I know that I'm going to get a message, which I did, from my United friends that are like, ha, 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 like, because he is the guy, right? He's our best ever player. I think that's, well, I mean, I guess you could maybe have that debate with Bergkamp and things like that, but I think it's kind of hard to make the argument, or let me just put it this way: it's easy to make an argument that Henry is the best Arsenal player. He's certainly one of the most iconic Arsenal players. So when he says something, there's a lot of weight to it. There's a lot of weight in everything that he says, especially Arsenal related. So I think necessarily you're going to get situations whenever he comments on Arsenal where it gets scrutinized, and any perceived negativity or direct negativity is going to be amplified based off of who he is and his relation to the club. That being said, I have no doubts that he is Arsenal through and through. He loves his club to his core. It's part of his identity as a person, which we know is he loves very much is himself, which is fine. And with that, Arsenal is one of the biggest parts of that, more so than anything else, I think, in his sporting career. Even though he won the Champions League with Barcelona, I mean, that it doesn't matter to him. It's Arsenal through and through. So knowing that, I truly believe he just wants what's best for this club, and whatever he does or says, I don't necessarily think it's coming from his perspective of any ulterior motive. Even with like a conflict of interest, again, I kind of agree with Drew that was more so a case of him doing what he thought or saying what he thought was best for the club. It might not always turn out that way. What he can say could actually be damaging sometimes, and sometimes it is, given, with great power comes great responsibility kind of a thing. And sometimes he has not been as responsible with the things that he says about Arsenal. But with this particular instance, it's kind of hard to disagree with a lot of what he was saying. And we've mentioned trophies, but finals as well. So a player knows that they can get to a final and lose. Getting to finals is just as important, I think, because they know that that's it. They had that last chance. It hurts a lot to lose one, but just getting to the final is something that we didn't talk about. And that's as important as a tangible success, like getting to that top point and fighting for that top point. I feel like if we had gotten to the Champions League final and lost, it would have hurt immensely. But I feel like we would be having a different feeling about it, I think. But either way, you have to look at getting to that point, which is getting to that final, getting to that point recently. And final isn't just final of a competition; it's getting down to the wire in a season where it's a title race. A title race is kind of like a final in a way. It's a drawn out, prolonged final, but you're getting there until the very end. This season we didn't do it, but previously we had.
Actually, can I just add something on that? I think last season, 23-24, when we made it to the final day of the season in contention for the title, I think that should count as a final.
I tend to agree, and that's kind of what I'm getting at here, is that if you're in a title race until the last day of the season, that's a final. That's a final for the Premier League trophy. In a way,
because you're in a we have to win this game scenario. And
ideally you're not in that scenario, and you're in like the way Liverpool were this season, and you win it early on, and then you have your last game, whatever game you need to win with time to spare is your final. But when it comes down to the last game of a season, you're kind of in a final in a way.
It's a do or die moment where if you lose, you are done.
And if you win, you get a trophy.
And if you win, you could get a trophy. And like
sounds like a final to me.
It is a day that decides whether or not you win something. And I think like that might be a technicality for some people, but like,
Well,
we did the work of being there on the last day, so
yeah.
I think it's only fair that they get the credit for it.
Right, and so I think that what Henry when Henry discounts in that
Be careful, Walcott will come after you.
I know exactly. What I think he discounts in his analysis is title races and the importance of those and what that actually means. Obviously, Henry knows more about title races than I ever will in my entire life. But I've been watching the sport long enough that I can kind of get a sense of what's important and what's not as well. And I think title races is something that's one of the most exciting things in sport, just as exciting as sometimes. Nerve-wracking. Every single game is relevant. Every single kick is relevant. Every single second on the clock is relevant in a title race. And it's where every little thing, every decision, everything matters. Early on in the season, you have a lot. You can see this runway at the end of the season, and you have a lot of wiggle room. But when it gets towards that crunch time, I mean, that is do or die, like you said. And I think it discounts the number of times we've been in that position recently. And I think would have been in the position this season had it not been for external factors that were out of our control, a lot within our control. I'm not discounting or making excuses, like we said before. But I think it does discount that a little bit.
Yeah. I think you also made a really good point there about how like Henry, like with like the with great power, great responsibility kind of thing. Because like again there are I have seen people come out and say like, oh, like this Henry guy will be a thing of the past one day, and I think we have to be honest here and recognize the fact that like even outside of the best player ever debate, right? Because you could talk about Bergkamp, you could talk about Vieira. I personally fall on the Henry side of that debate too.
You do.
But Henry is one of the most iconic players in the sport. Like this guy had Paraguayan players running up to him and screaming "Tu es mi idolo" after they scored a winner against the USA because he was pitch side doing commentary for CBS Sports. Like this guy is why most of our fans over the last 20 years have become Arsenal fans if they weren't born and raised in North London. And he's the reason why a lot of players join Arsenal because, they're like, oh, I grew up watching Henry. I loved Henry. Or like, I want to be like Henry and I want the number 14 shirt, anything like that. So I don't, anyone kind of lashing out at him over that and saying like, oh, you're not that big. Like he is, you're being bitter. But I do agree where like, I feel like every once in a while he just says something where he hasn't really thought it through. And that's kind of where I come down on this other comment where he's talking about our forward acquisitions. And he said, in reference to Mikel Arteta, he got Sterling when everyone wanted a 9. He had time to get a 9. He had time. I'm not the coach. I don't know the discussion. Everyone has been screaming for a 9, apart from when we win, by the way, because when we beat Real Madrid, we don't need a 9. You do need a 9. I don't understand the change. People change the way they talk. What we need a 9 when we're not scoring, and then suddenly we go on a run and nobody mentions that we need a 9. But you need a 9 for me, and a 9, we're talking about a 9.
Does he need a 9? I wonder if he thinks we need a 9.
I read the word 9 so many times that it felt weird to me by the end. But
it's called semantic satiation.
Yeah. Is that what that's called?
That's what that's called.
Okay. Well, I'm very semantically satiated right now.
Me too.
But like it's two things for me there, right? Where like number one, Arteta did not just end the summer by being like, what's all this center forward garbage we're trying to do? Why don't you just sign my buddy Raheem Sterling from Chelsea on loan at 12:03 on September 1st, whenever the fuck we did it, right? Like that's not his idea. That very clearly was Edu probably having a summer off because he already had one foot out the door. That's unkind. But I think Edu kind of, maybe his mind was not fully on the job the way it is when you're very sure that you're going somewhere else soon. we didn't have the optimal summer, and we scrambled for an option because we knew that Reese Nelson was leaving, and we needed someone there, right? So I really resent this characterization that Arteta was just like, yeah, let's just do Sterling and call it a day. That wasn't his idea. We're talking about a guy who has been kind of like the guy reported as being interested in, Vlahovic and Isak and Sesko, and all these other strikers, and like what's the name of the Everton striker with like 3 different names?
Calvert-Lewin.
Yeah, Dominic Calvert-Lewin, right? Like these are all guys who Arteta wanted reportedly. So I just think that is something that just really ignores a lot of context. And then on top of that, no, I don't know anyone who is saying that Arsenal don't need a center forward this summer, right? Like I've brought this up on a couple pods recently. Like maybe there's an option where we bring in 2 wide players and one of them is able to kind of drift into the middle and play as a false 9, right? Guys like maybe Antoine Semenyo or Brian Mbumu. But like no one is sitting here saying, oh yeah, like we're set. We're set at center forward. Like we don't need to do anything there. So those are just kind of like 2 things with that comment where it really just makes you sit back and think. I feel like sometimes Henry just says things because he's like on a roll in an interview, and he doesn't really he's not as analytical as I would like him to be in those moments, and really, capable of saying something that might be harsh but fair. But yeah.
I don't know. I kind of feel like, I don't know how many French or Parisians but they're very blunt. And oftentimes
I'm going to Paris at the end of the week, so I'll find out.
Well, I'm not going to. I don't like Paris personally. But let me know what you think about it when you go. For me, though, I feel like sometimes I think Henry can get caught up in some of the nonsense discourse on socials, maybe, and that's probably what he's referencing. I don't think he truly believes that rational Arsenal fans still don't think we need a center forward, right? I think he's referencing like the topsy-turvy people who bounce around opinions based off of what they see, whether we win or we lose. I think the overarching point is a lot of fans just aren't consistent in their own analysis of the club, right? Where it'll just be 1 minute it's one thing, the next is the next, and it's all about hot takes rather than actual cemented opinions based on fact. I think that's maybe what he's driving at. That's a guess on my part, but I think that would make sense. The Arteta stuff I think was probably a little bit weird, but I also feel like unfortunately the reality is the manager is the face of the club, and we remember how much flack Arsene Wenger used to take for decisions that weren't his, and yet still he was the one facing the music. And I kind of feel like that's probably why Henry referenced Arteta, not to blame Arteta per se, but unfortunately the manager is the standard bearer for the club. He's the one that's facing the media multiple times a day. He's the one that's guiding us on the pitch. So that's probably why he said Arteta. I don't know if he truly believes Arteta made or didn't make the decision. I don't know. We'd have to ask him, which we'll never be able to do. But I just kind of feel like he's using Arteta as that kind of focal point. If he truly believes that Arteta is the one that kind of lollygagged in the market and kind of just and didn't make decisions until the final day and it was Sterling, if he actually believes that, then I'd have some questions as well, because that wouldn't make sense to me logically at all. But I think maybe he's kind of one of those like passionate caught up in the moments. Clearly he's frustrated in terms of like Arsenal missing the boat, the last summer or two probably, and he expects the club to not do that this summer as well. So I think it's kind of a mixed bag of emotions, if you will, so to speak. But overall, I don't have much issue with the comments he made about the 9 the 9 debate. I'm fine with how he felt about that, but I think overall, yeah, I think I think he wants the same thing all the fans want, and like John said, he's massively rooted in this club, in the fabric of Arsenal. And you saw it in that Paramount Plus interview where he took his kids back to Highbury, and you could see the emotions that he was holding back just being there. Yeah. That's how you know someone's like viscerally connected to the club, and he's a fan despite being an ex-player. So I think that's probably comes from a lot of that. But, yeah.
I mean, I might be being a little nitpicky at the end.
You nitpicky? That's never happened ever.
Me?
I'm
Not
being
me,
very
man.
sarcastic.
Yeah, but we'll move on from that. But we are hitting the 50-minute mark, so I'm increasingly convinced we should just leave the superlatives for another day. Otherwise, this is going to be a 2-hour podcast. So we'll wrap up with a chat about one Benjamin Sesko. And kind of the main transfer news of the week has been, in addition to Zubamendi, well, I mean, there's some shenanigans with Sociedad by not concerned about that at the moment. The main transfer news has been we have reportedly, according to a lot of people, started entering negotiations for Sheshko. And it sounds more and more, if like the smoke is to be an indicator of fire in any way, it sounds more and more like we are going to make a move for Sheshko, and Gyökeres is kind of off the table for us at this point. Actually, while we were potting, a report came out from Bild, and that's pronounced Bild, that says, let me translate this because I always get the ones in Arabic. After Slovenia's matches this week, Benjamin Šeško's transfer may be finalized. Arsenal is the most serious, and the player is said to be leaning towards Arsenal. Manchester United are prioritizing him, while Bayern Munich and Milan are monitoring the situation. Leipzig wants to close the deal quickly and is asking for 100 million euros, but with an offer of 70 million euros, they would be willing to negotiate. So yeah, it sounds like we made our choice, and it sounds like we're going to go with Šeško. So kind of just off the bat here, and John, I'll go to you first here. How are you feeling about the decision to pick Šeško seemingly over Gyökeres?
To be honest, I'm okay with either. I've been okay with either. I think that they're both excellent, athletes, and I think that they're amazing strikers. All right. Sesko had 21 goals and 6 assists across all competitions, and I think 4 in the Champions League. So the guy can score. We need if he can give us 20 plus goals, or 20 plus goal involvements in a season. I mean, that's what we're asking for. I was kind of leaning more towards the Gyökeres, but if we had either of those, I wasn't going to complain. I think we need a striker, and he's a striker, and he's a good striker, and there's a lot of potential for him too. How old is he? Isn't he young? He's like
Šeško? Yeah, he's like 21.
He's young. So
yeah.
the problem that I saw with Šeško was it was a little bit of a project, a little bit more so than I think Gyökeres would have been, who would have been a little bit more ready to hit the ground, running, and maybe needed a little bit less in that department. But if because we really need that to work. All right, whatever striker we end up picking, we need it to work, and we need it to work immediately. He's an amazing talent. I have no doubt that Arteta can make it happen. You just got to hope that all of those growing pains that you get from a player coming into a new league are minimized or mitigated in a way, and that he can do what he can do or better. Because this is a step up for him. So you always worry about a player making a step up, and that would have been for Gyökeres as well, not even more so than Sesko. So I like it. I like the profile of the player. I like the age profile. I like that he's going to be hungry. I like that he's obviously an immensely talented striker, and that there's even more potential. He hasn't actualized, I think, what he's fully capable of. So if we're building something, I think that in a way that I didn't see Havertz being, I think Sesko could absolutely fill that role. So I'm not upset about it. And if that's who if they're set on it, I just hope it's because they realized they could get him, and that's who they wanted, and not because of it being a plan B. Although sometimes plan Bs work, I want us to get our first choice. If he's our first choice, that's what I want. That's kind of where I'm at. I want us to get whatever first choice we had that they said this is who we want and this is who we identified. That's what I want to get. If it's Sesko, go for it. I'm a little less enthused if it isn't.
Yeah, I think anyone we signed this summer, to be honest, is a plan B to Isak. Just because it looks like that one's not going to happen. But
yeah, I guess as far as Plan Bs go, then you could do a lot worse than Sesko.
Yeah. No, I like it a lot personally because I'm not saying Gyökeres is a bad player or anything. I think he's a really good striker. I think the main problem I always had with Gyökeres is he wasn't the best fit for how we play. And I think Sesko fits in pretty nicely.
In what sense?
I think Sesko is able to. The hold up play is a little lacking, and I was talking with Kern about this a couple episodes ago. Sometimes he just doesn't realize that like he's a big guy, right? And so that doesn't show in his hold up play. But I think link up wise, he's really good. He's good at dropping deep, which is why Leipzig made him do that a lot this season, which is why kind of if you look at the heat maps, he's out of the box more often than guys like Gyökeres and Ekitike. But he's able to do that stuff, but also he's fast. He doesn't dally if he wants to shoot the ball. It comes out of his feet really quickly, shoots it like a cannon. Again, really tall, 6'5", and is able, like, he's an aerial threat. That's kind of another issue that I had with Gyökeres. Gyökeres, I think, it's like 4 of his last like 80 or so goals. I know I got the number wrong, but it's a lot of goals. 4 of his last like 80, 90 goals were headers, right? And he's just not a guy who's known as being like proficient in the air. Sesko doesn't really have that problem. And, I just think with the youth aspect, yes, like this isn't the final product that we're bringing in, right? This is a guy who has some growing to do, some refinement to do. But I mean, Desiree Doué had 2 goals and an assist in the Champions League final yesterday. And that guy's like what, 18, 19, So I think it's one of those things where even like if the talent is there, even not being like at your peak or like, polished, so to say, I think there's still a lot that players like that can add. And I think sometimes players are just more ready to make the step up than a lot of us expect them to be. So yeah, I just think Sesko fits in really well to like what we want a center forward to do. And he also adds in a couple characteristics and traits that we've needed from a center forward. And he's not going to come in and displace Havertz immediately. Like I don't think he would start over Havertz for a lot of the season, but I think this is a guy who maybe in the back half of the season or in, games here and there where we need to rotate and he'll be the starter, and then in other matches he'll come off the bench. Like I think he has a lot to contribute. And if we sign Gyökeres instead, if something happens and we go back to Gyökeres, that's fine. But I just think Sesko is that little bit more suited to how we want to play right now. But Drew, I want to bring you in here. How are you feeling about deciding to go after Sesko? And kind of are you similar to John in that like either option works for you, or are you leaning one way or another?
I don't have an opinion right now because I have this hard line where I don't get sucked into like speculation. Like just for me, that I just become wider because of work. Like there isn't a single reliable source that has discussed like this thing with Sesko. It hasn't come from Ornstein, Mark Bell, the BBC, the Athletic. Not even the most reliable German sources have talked about it. Like Sportschau have not talked about it. Sport One have not mentioned it. So I don't trust Romano at all. We don't trust Romano at work. We don't ever push news from him for a reason because it's one of those things where, like, I think a lot of fans, and I don't mean you guys, I mean just fans on social media in general, like a lot of fans kind of think like they become so enamored with Romano because people forget that like he can just tweet whatever. And if it does come to pass, he has the perfect card to play and say, oh, well, I can control if someone changes their mind. Like, that's why I don't listen to that. You know what I mean? Like, and also he can just say, well, people have free will and last minute so-and-so came in and, oh, my information is wrong. Like, so I generally don't believe most things I see on social media until it comes from like someone who is like, this source is only going on record when it's as concrete as humanly possible. Mm-hmm. So I don't know what the situation is right now in terms of if this is true. It could very well be. I don't know if it is. This is the player itself. I'm with John. I think we talked about it a few times, almost ad nauseum, where it's just we need a center forward. I was happy with both. I still think Gyökeres is slightly more polished and more of in the win now option. But Sesko, and I said before, has a higher ceiling than Gyökeres does for sure. And I think that's kind of why Arteta wants him as bad as he do, because if you know for a fact, or if you're at the point where you know as close as you can be to where this player is going to be one of the top center forwards in the game within the next 3 years, get him now. And that's kind of the mistake they made with Isak. They didn't get Isak when he was at Real Sociedad, right? So I think if anything, they're trying to make sure they don't repeat that same mistake. And yeah, I think he's a brilliant player, but I think there's a lot of context in terms of what he offers now, because a lot of fans don't watch Bundesliga, and John probably watches a fair amount. I don't know if he still does, but Bundesliga forwards get a lot of space and time. A lot of space and time. He's not getting that in the Premier League. Yeah, he's quite quick for a guy that's slightly taller than John and I. He knows that his ball striking is very good when he consistently can do it. His ball striking can still be inconsistent, but that just comes with time. And I think my issue with him is that when you're 21 and you still don't know you're 6'5" and can use your frame, that to me is an issue from that athletic standpoint. That's something I talk with my brother about, who works in the basketball space. My brother he's quite a big dude. He's 6'8", 6'9", whatever. And one of the things he's saying is when you work with younger players, when they're like 14, 15, and they're like 6'6", they don't know that they're 6'6" when they're 14 or 15. That's valid. When you're 21, you should know by then that you're 6'5". You should know how to use that frame by the time you're 20. You should know how to use that before you're 21. So it's either two things. Either he's not capable of being that kind of physical presence, or that's never been highlighted when he's been coached and managed. And I struggle to think that that's been the case, because 6'5" in football for a center forward that's that agile and mobile, you would highlight that as part of their game. So will he be able to translate that size and frame to the Premier League to use it to his advantage? I hope so. And that's kind of I think with Sesko, it's so much like we know how good he can become. Will he become that good? Because, like we've all said before, this is such a critical decision for the club, where I don't believe that like the fee involved is why. I don't think all of a sudden Leipzig are going to want €100 million out of nowhere, which is like 85 million pounds, which would be 20 million above for his previous like the previous quotes or whatever. I just want the club to get it right. You know, there's a gamble with each player. It's not Isak, so obviously because it's not Isak, we have to go with the next best option that we think is going to get us as close as possible. But yeah, I'm not sad about it, because I think he's going to become an elite level player. It's just a matter of, can we coach that in him if we get him, and is it the right decision? But I'm not sad about it if we get him. Like I said, either player I'd be totally fine with, because in the interim and also in the long term, it's going to be a better center forward than Havertz. And I love Kai Havertz, but he's not a center forward. And I do think if we go and spend that money on Sesko, I think he'll be starting more than people realize, and that'll open up some tactical equations where you might actually start seeing Havertz in another role, because people forget Havertz's best work at Leverkusen when he was playing more of a support role to a center forward, being kind of almost like a second striker, more like another 10 behind the center forward, that brought out Rodriguez was making those late runs into the box. The fact that he is a technical player, even though people don't realize it, the fact that he does press quite well. When you get that in another midfielder, it opens up a few things as well. So, yeah, I mean, again, I'm not sad about this. I'm not getting tied to it until we hear it from someone who, you know, doesn't get things wrong in the media. So,
really quick. Sorry, I just wanted to, because you mentioned something, and it was something that I had said, and I was just thinking about it. I think managers do like the project aspect of a player. I feel like there's less joy of having a player that's already coached, you know, from someone who likes to build players like Arteta does. I feel like there's some kind of like personal thing that if you would ask him, if you had a choice in a perfect world of getting a player that's an absolute top prospect or someone who's already ready-made, I bet you 9 times out of 10 he chooses the former. Because I think he likes a project. And I think that a lot of managers are like that. You know, there's certain cases, but I think we need to abandon that sometimes. And hopefully this is a case where the project aspect of it isn't outweighed by the talent that's already there. Because obviously Sesko is very talented for all the reasons we said. But it's just something interesting I was thinking about.
Yeah. Drew, do you Do you have any idea as to why none of the reliable sources have? I mean, I feel like I'm probably asking an obvious question here, but is there something that we're missing here?
I don't think
Is
it's anything we're
like,
missing. I just feel like I personally, I feel like the reason why the sources that are reliable that are is because they won't go on record until they know for sure. Ornstein never tweets anything unless, or goes on a podcast or whatever, unless the information he's bringing is as close to the truth as it possibly can be. And he'll always give a caveat, right? Like whatever he writes for the Athletic or he goes into a podcast, he'll give you the caveats, but he'll never put himself on record unless he knows that what he's delivering is as accurate as it can be. And most other media sources don't have to be that way. They can just tweet out or write about absolute nonsense because it's a lot of media, unfortunately, is clickbaity, and a lot of fans like the debate. They like reading transfer stories. Transfer stories are hugely popular in media, whether it's true or not, or how reliable it is or not. It'll get engagement, right? So, yeah, I just feel like that's just kind of my hard line, especially this summer, because we know that we're going to be one of the biggest topics of debate across the summer in terms of how we're going to spend the money, how we're going to challenge Liverpool's who are already going out in the market and spending, how we're going to make sure we fend off, City who are, going after some top players as well. So the media know that they can just kind of use Arsenal again as one of those talk points that are guaranteed to get engagement, right? So my golden rule is unless it comes from certain people or certain places, I literally just don't listen to it. So when the Sesko news broke, I checked who was tweeting it. It's largely Fabrizio Romano, right? It's largely one or two other places. I'm just like, well, I have no opinion yet. Like that's kind of where it is for me. That's just my own golden rule. Fans can operate however they want, but that's just me.
yeah, I think it's been Fabrizio Romano, Florian Plettenberg, and
Yeah.
Philippe Hines,
Yep.
who are probably the main guys report. There's also a couple other people, and those are kind of names I don't necessarily put that much stock in. But yeah, I mean, you're right. No one who like is a certified,
Has said
rubber
anything
stamp.
about it. Yep.
Yeah,
Mhm.
has mentioned it yet, which I do find interesting. Because Ornstein will at least tweet if like a player is or if a team's entered
And
negotiations,
he hasn't yet.
right? Like for the Verts thing, like
Mhm.
he was talking about how Liverpool are like advancing in negotiations for Verts. So yeah, that's interesting to kind of know, and we'll see if that means anything.
Yeah, it could mean something.
Or
It could mean literally. It could just mean he's just waiting. Like because sometimes, like, and Tom said it too. Tom said Orange Team will like double, triple, quadruple check
yeah, yeah,
before he'll say anything. And it could just be that he's heard the same things that some other places have, but he'll just want that double or triple confirmation. Which is anyone that's ever seen anything like the show The Newsroom or whatever, like long ago, or West Wing, like people in like the most reliable places in media will double and triple check it. It's no different than writing a dissertation. Like how many sources do you pull for a dissertation before you actually bring it to the committee, right? It's very, very similar, right? So yeah, I just feel like waiting for those kind of key names to pop up and give us information, I think is just the most sensible thing, and also will spare people's mental space for the rest of the summer. Just yeah,
yeah, yeah. We'll see. I mean, yeah, it's gonna be a long summer because I already see people who, they're either doing that thing where like another team is linked to a player and it's like, oh my god, Arsenal, like you're not doing anything, like, and then
yep,
sometimes it's like someone tweets, we are like someone tweets like Arsenal are currently looking into extending with this player or negotiating with this player, and they're like, oh my god, Arsenal, like what are you doing, I feel like we do treat a lot of things as certainties, and we do treat a lot of things as confirmation of like our worst fears before they have actually come to pass. So that is going to be a long summer in those regards. But um, we'll put a bow on it here, and we will be back later this week with the first annual Goonies or season superlatives, whichever one you want. And we'll do that because there's several categories we just don't have time for today. But yeah, so we'll do that, and if there is other news to talk about, we'll talk about it. I feel like this is going to be kind of like a quiet moment in the summer before things really do start chugging along. But yeah, thanks for being here. Especially, if you've subscribed or followed or anything like that, or found the pod in the last couple weeks. Thanks for coming on board. We hope you stay on board. Got a lot of content planned for this summer. And you can follow me on Twitter at Shamsdale. You can follow John at 305cast and at yellowribbons.bsky.social on Bluesky. You can follow Drew at Geechee Kid on Twitter and at supplyanddemanddrew.bsky.social on Bluesky. You can follow the pod on Twitter at NotThatGooner and on Bluesky at NotThatGooner.bsky.social. We're on Instagram at NotThatKindOfGooner. We're on TikTok at NotThatKindOfGooner. All the handles for all the social media is going to be in the show notes for this episode, so do check that out. But 1 second, I need to cough. All right, I'm back. But yeah, thanks so much for being here, and we will be back with you again later this week after Arsenal dominate the transfer window. We'll see about that. But until then, take care and bye. Goonies. Bye.
Secret Gooner. All right, I'm a Gooner. Oh, I love you.
To go! Santi Cazorla! Oh, Saka! That is a goal! When Yerry